Chapter 9. European Blueies. As we approached the border of South Yorkshire just 3 hours later, I briefly explained to the lads I was a wanted man, and intended to fly to an island somewhere in the Far East where there was little chance I could be brought home without a whole world of red tape. The looks on their faces suggested they thought I was talking bollocks. Fortunately for them, I wasn't. We pulled up back in Grimethorpe early the next morning. That place was a desert of misery, where a man could trample its narrow streets for hours without meeting another soul, lost and alone, and never to find his way out. The whole place had an air of rejection, as if the council had forgotten about it. Given some of its inhabitants, 2 of them in my car, I could understand why. I gave Shippy a tenner for his troubles, a piss-take of epic proportions for what I'd led him to believe. But they'd had a bellyful and a night's stay on me. What more could they expect? He knew not to query his pay packet. He had asked if he could borrow a few extra quid, only for a few days, he said, until something comes up. I'd no fear he'd pay me back normally, but given I'd just told him I was leaving the country, I knew his intentions were crooked. I elected not to bother. We shook hands on the pavement and wished each other luck, both knowing the chances of meeting again were negligible after I'd indicated I was leaving the country for good. I drove Wiggly to his detached house over in Shafton, a suburb on the outskirts of Barnsley. I quickly jumped out of the car and sliced £2 from the spoils in the boot. I handed it over to Wiggly and he gave me back £500 as wages for the job itself. I almost burst out laughing. The ridiculousness of me still getting my wages after the haul I'd just took almost too much for me to contain. I did my utmost to appear grateful, along with my modest expenses. He'd paid me with a wheezy laugh and said it was well worth it. All the threats and fiddling would stop. It was a pleasure to do business with me. He was completely oblivious to the fact that I'd recovered a whole world more. I doubt he'd heard anything from the guy who'd owed him it in the first place, but in reality he was now the debtor, so I wasn't going to hang around. Anyway, that didn't matter to me. In a couple of days I'd be long gone, living like a veritable king in Singapore. I'd handed over the amount of the debt, but kept the rest for myself, including the jewellery, gold, and another night's sleep, all well earned. After I dropped the lads off in Barnsley, I headed over to see my old pal Dennis Flint up on the heath one last time. His place, Rosebarn Cottage, was a veritable mansion in a well-to-do area on the outskirts of Wakefield. I could only ever dream of dwelling in such a place. I'd owed him £800 that he'd let me to get myself back on my feet when I'd got out of the nick last time, and I was a man of my word, where Dennis was concerned anyway. I knew he wouldn't have missed it even if I hadn't, but that wasn't the point. Dennis was a stocky, dignified fella, living the high life of Rolls Royces, expensive cigars, fine whiskies, gold jewellery, and had birds lined up further down the street than Joe Bugner. You could smell the minted dollars coming from him like aftershave. I knew the racket operated right from the top, and Dennis was at the top as far as I was concerned. I was his latest line and doing a bomb. I could do no wrong in his eyes. He was the one who put me onto the debt collecting job, and though not directly linked, I felt obliged to drop him off a little drink, as well as the £800 to show my appreciation. He was lucky. Normally my morals didn't stretch that far, especially when I knew I was destined to leave the country any day. I knocked on the door and continued to barge straight in. He must have known my knock by now, as I heard him holler down the corridor.
"Is that you, Paul, my old pal? Come on in."
His office was beautifully upholstered with thick red carpets and reeked of opulence and the finer things in life. He weighed me up like I was a second-hand car he was thinking of buying.
"So how did the job go, Paul? I say, how did you get on down there?"
That was one of his traits, to reiterate his questions. Lord knows where it came from.
"Did you get your wages? I say, did you get your wages?"
As well as reinforcing his questions, He was always vague when he referred to criminal acts, as if the words wouldn't come into his mouth. The learned practice of a man who could never be caught. "I did all right, Dennis, I did all right," his reiteration rubbing off on me. "Anyway, there's what I owe you, plus a drink for the tip-off." I pushed a neatly bundled grand across his bespoke Rolls-Royce-styled desk. He'd had it especially made for himself as an ode to his success in the motor trade. He beamed with bonhomie as he counted the money with an efficiency I'd never seen before, and then looked at me with a new light in his crafty old eyes.
"I've got another little job for you if you fancy it, Paul."
A statement I usually would have welcomed. "What's that, Dennis?" I replied.
"I've got some documents I need moving over from Leicester to Wakefield for storage."
Giving me a disingenuous wink. I knew exactly what these documents were. He'd got a load of European import blueies, pornographic magazines, a kind outlawed in the UK. It was an easy one, but it just didn't warrant the pull when I was so close to leaving the UK forever. "I'll give it a miss if you don't mind, Dennis. I'm hoping to be out of the country in the next couple of days and wouldn't appreciate the pull," I said begrudgingly, turning down an easy quid.
"No worries, Paul, but I'm sure you'll be fine, and the extra holiday spends would come in handy, surely."
"I'll give it a miss all the same, thanks, Dennis. Try Cuckoo, he might fancy it," I said in an attempt to still help get the job done.
"If you play for pennies, Paul, that's all you'll win,"
he said. He was mercenary when it came to a £1 note. "Thanks anyway, but I'm done with this town." A nagging thought in the back of my mind telling me I'd be back. "Catch you later, Dennis, me old pal."
"All the best, Paul. See you in a month,"
he replied with a look of absolute surety in his eyes. Cheeky bastard, I thought, but he was usually right. From there I'd dropped by my pal Berkey's place up near New Millardom to collect my passport, the one Dell had shelled out for me. I'd been shrewd enough to keep it well away from any of my known addresses and hangouts. Dell had once made a trip specifically to instruct me I had to get myself a passport. I'd kept it at Berkey's indefinitely after a previous bust, when the local coppers had asked for it as I was deemed a flight risk. I'd managed to convince them a numbskull like me didn't even have one, and they'd bought it. I knew this rainy day had come, and I needed it right now. I made a point of passing through the town at speed. I wanted one last lap of the family patch before leaving forever. There was surely a general alert out for my arrest in Wakefield, but I just couldn't keep away from the place, and the local constabulary knew that. I recall thinking the lights of Wakefield Nick looked just like the candles on a birthday cake. The skyline a little to the east was a silhouette I'd seen so many times I could describe it with my eyes closed, and that's all I'd be able to do once I was gone. Little did they know I'd made my decision and I was leaving for good. Somewhere in the back of my mind, though, I knew I'd be back, attached by an invisible band that forever brought me back home. I didn't fancy being in the nick for the rest of my life, and I couldn't bear the thought. Cons on the whole were the silliest bastards of them all, and to think I was one of them made my blood boil. No wonder I preferred it behind my door out the way. I lit a park drive, coughed, wound the window down and spat at a new Cortina as it passed. I came to the conclusion I was stale. It was my body telling my brain to change the routine and shock it into life again. It wanted a fresh challenge.